unless Russia allocates sufficient resources. And I think Kadyrov and the others have come up with a solution that's viable. The recruitment of these volunteer units, which are going to be raised specifically to fight in the special military operation. And I think if they can get, 100, 150, 200,000 of these, Russia's going to end up doing okay in this conflict.
Yeah. It looks like we're having some problems with the stream. It keeps failing, and I'm restarting it, but people are coming back. They're saying they got a CIA team on us, shutting us down. So we're up against a big force. I wanted to go to there a couple weeks ago. There was an Israeli mercenary who was captured by Russian forces, and they sent him back to Israel, and that is different than the treatment that a lot of mercenaries are getting. A lot of the mercenaries from Britain and Western countries have been sentenced to death in some cases. Why do you think they allowed the Israeli one to go home?
I have to be really careful I answer this question, not because I'm afraid of the truth. It's just that this is such a hot potato. Anytime you talk about Israel and the Jewish relationships, you got to be really careful what you say because your words can be misconstrued. Okay. So I want to start off by saying that I am not the most diplomatically adept person with my language, and I don't intend to insult anybody. But the Russian Jewish problem or the Soviet Jewish problem has been a problem. I mean, go back to the 1970s and the issue of Jewish migration to get out of. Go back to World War II and the Holocaust. Go back to Tsarist Russia and the pogroms. I mean, the Jews have been on the short end of the stick historically for a long time. And the state of Israel was created with the hope of providing the Jewish people, mainly European Jews, with a homeland where they could live with never again in fear of pogroms, holocausts, etc. There's still a significant Jewish population that lives in Europe today, in Russia, Ukraine, elsewhere. During Soviet times, this became a sort of a political, hot potato. How do you get the Jews that wanted to immigrate to Israel, immigrate to the United States? How do you convince the Soviets to allow this to happen? We passed a law. Two guys, Action, and then there's another name. But it was basically a law that sanctioned Russia because of their restrictive immigration policies for Jews. When the Soviet Union collapsed, especially in Ukraine, there was a massive immigration of Jews from Ukraine, from Russia to Israel. I was in Israel at the time. I worked in Israel from 1994 to 1998, off and on. I did a lot of trips there. And the Israelis, they were very open about it. They said this has fundamentally changed the reality of Israel. Israel went from being a nation of around 5 million to a nation of over 6 million. And that increase was all Soviet Jews coming in, who had a completely different outlook on Arab-Israeli relations. So they became a very powerful political force. And that political force exists today. There's strong ties between the diaspora. It's not a diaspora really because they're living in their homeland now, but the Jews that live in Israel that were from the Soviet Union have strong connectivity with Russia and Ukraine. The political ties are there. There's great sensitivity right now with Russia's involvement in Syria, where Russia and Israel have the potential of direct conflict, and both sides are working very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. So this is a political hot potato for the Russians. We know that there's a lot of Jewish mercenaries, Israeli mercenaries in Ukraine. But we also know that the Jewish issue has far more radioactivity attached to it than just about any other. And look, I know this personally because, I was accused for political reasons back when I was a UN weapons inspector. I was accused of being an Israeli spy. I was charged with espionage, the penalty of which is death.
Wow.
So, I personally know how much of a hot potato the issue of Israel is for American politics. The charges were all eventually dropped, by the way, because I wasn't an Israeli spy. But the point is, there's a lot of sensitivities about Israel, and I think those sensitivities they are bigger in Russia than people possibly know. The sensitivity of the Russian government about the Jewish question, Jewish issues. So, Russia's not going to allow an Israeli, a Jew, to be killed by a Russian. Just think about it for a second. With all the history that happened, you're going to take a Jew, you're going to condemn him to death, and you're going to execute him.
Well,
really, that's the image you want to project. So no, you're just going to send that guy home and pretend it never happened.
Well, they wouldn't be killing him because he's Jewish. It would be because
it doesn't matter. The spin, man, the spin. It's just optically, you don't want to create that. Why? This is, this is in Ukraine. Bobby Yar, 30, 40,000 guys got slaughtered. I'm just saying, again, I have to be really careful what I'm saying right now. This is a very, very sensitive topic, but from pure optics, regardless of what you think. Remember, I think I've told you this before. I've said it many, many times. Brigadier General Roland LaJoy, commander or the director of the On-Site Inspection Agency, I'm locked in front of his desk because I did something I thought was right. And he's convinced that I did it was wrong. So I'm explaining to him why I'm right. And he shut me up. And he said, Ritter, when you're explaining, you're losing. And right now you're in front of my desk explaining. You lost. Get out of here. No Russian politician, no foreign ministry wants to sit there and because say, hey, look, we're legally correct. As a mercenary, he committed crimes and all that. So we have every right to try him and execute him like everybody else. Wow. So we have one great moment where we get to execute the guy, and then we have to spend 15 years dealing with the political fallout of that. Strategically, just make him disappear, send him home. And I think that's what they're doing.
So are you saying that Russian leadership is worried about the blowback they would get domestically or internationally? Because
both.
Why would Russia care internationally at this point? I mean, internationally speaking, the West, they don't care.
Because of the strong. Remember, 1/6 fully, well, more than that, maybe a quarter of the Israeli population has strong links, familial links, with Russia. It's a big problem. You can't ignore it. It's a political problem for Russia. It's not that they care what the United States thinks or anybody else. But remember, Russia also has to interface with the world. You don't want to be the Russian foreign ministry showing up in any nation having demonstrations saying, Jew killer. No, that's a problem we don't need. So rather than, doing something that's right, and then trying to explain it to a world that doesn't want to hear the explanation, they've already made their decision on how they're going to spin this. Just make the problem go away. Send him home. Don't talk about it.
That makes sense.
And now I'm going to get a million. I don't know what your chat's looking like, but I just know that I'm going to get, attacked for this. So, yay.
You're going to get attacked anyways, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about Russia seems to be implementing Iranian drones on the battlefield, specifically.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let me tell you why it surprised me. Not that Russia wouldn't absorb technology that's needed. First of all, there's a lot we don't know. The drone looks like, sounds like, smells like. It looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. It's a duck. These drones look like a Shahed 139, quack like a 139, talk like. I think they're probably Shahed 139s. The Russian can call them. I think there's another name. It begins with a G, a GNOME 2 or something like that. Is this an Iranian drone that's just simply been repainted? Or is this an Iranian drone design that's been taken to a Russian factory and built to Russian standards? I always felt that the Russians would hesitate to absorb large numbers of Iranian-built drones simply because of no military likes to buy something sight unseen. What is the quality control? What is the maintenance? There's a whole bunch of issues attached to bringing in this weapon system that can create problems for the Russians if they haven't planned this sufficiently. So I thought the notion of them, the United States was trying to spin this as Russia went to Iran and desperately bought thousands of drones that we're going to bring in and start using. And I said, that doesn't really sound like what Russia would be doing. Well, let's start off with reality. Apparently, Russia's using a lot of drones that look an awful lot like the Shahed-139. They're using them very effectively. I mean, they're swarming the area. So did Russia do what I didn't think they were going to do and go out and buy all these drones already built by the Iranians and simply repaint them? Or did Russia set up an assembly line in Russia, bring in prototypes, reverse engineer them, and are cranking them out now? And one of the ways you do this is the Iranians can send in what we'll call kits. And we see this anytime, like when Egypt builds the M1A1 or the M1 tank, we send kits into Egypt, and then Egypt assembles those kits into the tank. So they're Egyptian built, but they're American kits. Did Iran send in kits to a Russian factory that then assembles them, putting in Russian components where they need? Because, what encryption are they using? Are they using Iranian encryption? That's incompatible with Russian encryption. What communication systems are they using? When something breaks, do they have to go back to Iran to get the spare parts, or are they going to put in a Russian system that already has its own spare parts availability for maintenance? So these are questions we don't know. What it appears, though, is that Russia made a decision that the Shahed-139 type drone was of value in Ukraine. And when I said I thought that the Kalashnikov factory was going to produce enough of these Russian suicide drones that Russia didn't need to worry about that. It appears I was wrong, that maybe Russia had exhausted the stockpile that came out of Kalashnikov, and that the new reality of war in Ukraine requires these drones, and that they weren't going to be able to build enough, so they went out and bought drones. That appears to be the case. So, hey, that's what happens when you do intelligence analysis. You make a decision up front, the facts change, you have to reassess. It looks like Russia is. Now, I personally believe this is more a case of Russia assembling kits and installing Russian components that provide for connectivity with communication-wise, secure comms, and for maintenance with parts. I don't know. I mean, the only way I'd know is if I actually got my hands on one of the, some of the wreckage and went through it and got the serial numbers off and traced the serial numbers back, et cetera. But it doesn't matter. Russia's using them. So that's the new reality.
Well, aren't they suicide drones, kamikaze drones, if you will?
Yeah.
So what maintenance would really be necessary on them?
Over time, I mean, things have to, even when you're not using stuff, you've got to maintain it, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I think, more critically, good question. You could be a UN weapons inspector. That's the kind of question you ask to follow up when some guy's streaming a line of BS. Hit him with the question. But the other thing is the communications. You still have to communicate. And one thing we don't know is, are these AI drones, artificial intelligence? Are these launch and forget? Meaning that I've got my drone, I program a search area, I put in what I'm looking for, and then I fire it off. And if that's the case, then maybe you don't need to worry about communications. I don't know enough about the how this drone actually works to come up with that answer. I do know that the Russians are loath to acquire systems outside of the defense industry weapons procurement cycle, but wars bring on their own their own realities, and regardless of what I thought, what I think, et cetera, those drones are there and they're being used. Whether Russia has sufficient maintenance, whether they have sufficient communications, it don't matter. They're using them, and that it is what it is.
How do you think these drones will affect the battlefield? What battlefield effect will they have?
Well, again, I don't know enough about the drones. Meaning, what is the response? Are they be jammed? how easily can they be shot down? Because for every problem, there's a solution. There's no such thing as the perfect weapon. Right now, about the only perfect weapon that's been employed in Ukraine theater is the Kinzhal missile. There's no solution to that. You fire it, it's going to hit, but it's going to hit. Other than that, there's a solution for everything. So, one of the dangers, for instance, let's say the United States was right and Russia bought, I don't know, thousands of these drones. Now they bring them in and they start using them. And immediately the Ukrainians, because remember, the Ukrainians have, the wreckage that's on the ground? You know who controls it right now? Us, no. America. Okay. The Ukrainians got the wreckage. They've pulled the wreckage out, and you have technical intelligence teams right now that are going through that thing, doing everything I just told you about. They're trying to reverse engineer this, find out what the hell's going on. They're testing the paint materials. They're going through and checking the glue that's used. They're doing everything to figure out where this came from, what it does, what its vulnerabilities are, etc. And once they figure that out, they will come up with a solution. They'll figure out what the radar cross section of this thing is. They'll program the air defense radars to specifically track this thing down. They'll figure out what its heat signature is. They'll program the heat-seeking warheads. There is a solution. So if the Russians bought 1,000 of these things, they use 75, and the Ukrainians get a solution. The rest of it, the 925 that are left, are very valuable. So we have to answer that question. But let's say it works perfectly. The one thing it does is it allows the Russians to more effectively answer, for instance, the HIMARS problem. Because right now, HIMARS, it's a big shell game. They're moving HIMARS around, boom, 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 bring it up, fire, back, resupply. And the Russians right now are doing their thing, intelligence-wise, and every once in a while they get lucky. Hey, there it is, in the warehouse. Bam, we got us a HIMARS. Oh, look, the HIMARS is out in the open. Bam, we got us a HIMARS. But they're not getting all of them because the HIMARS is continuing to pound the dog poop out of the Russians. So what these drones do, in theory, I believe you can fire them out, and they're going to be patrolling over this area, and they're programmed to look for HIMARS-type footprints, identify it, and then on their own, come in and attack it. But they can do that with air defense. They're programmed to check out a specific kind of target. And if they work, you now have a greater disruptive capability than before. They can go deep, they can disrupt, they can improve Russia's ability to interdict supply lines, shut down NATO command and control. They can shut down radars, counter battery radars. So if they work, they're a very important weapon. They can be decisive. But again, every weapon has a solution. Mm-hmm. And I don't know enough to tell you whether or not Ukraine is going to be able to come up with a solution quickly. Russia has shown a proclivity to be able to nullify a lot of the technology that we bring in. We give Ukraine a new kind of technology. The Ukrainians use it to great effect. They kill a bunch of Russians. But the Russians sit there and they got their technical intelligence guys too. They sit there, boom, 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 change. Bam, nothing. HARM missile. The HARM missile, it was our secret weapon, not secret, but it was the Iraqis knew you couldn't turn on an air defense weapon radar and because you're going to get about 20 HARMs fired at you, and boom, that's the end of the radar. It was a very good weapon, and in theory, it could cause a lot of problems for Russian air defense. But it appears the Russians have figured this thing out. The HARM isn't having the impact on the battlefield that they thought it was going to have, because for every weapon, there's a solution, and the Russians apparently have a solution for that. And the Russians are working on a solution for HIMARS as well. So, Ukraine and NATO are going to be working on a solution to the Sheen 139. That's just the way war works.
We're seeing another weapons package going to Ukraine. I believe the Biden administration announced it either yesterday or earlier this morning, and they say it will include quote advanced missile systems. And the Russians warned that if the USA does provide longer range missiles, then Russia would consider them a direct what do you call it? A
threat.
Yes, a direct threat.
Well, basically, the United States becomes a party to the conflict.
Yes.
A direct party to the conflict.
Yes, Russia is saying they would consider the U.S. a direct party to the conflict. I have two questions here. One, what missile do you think it is? Do you think it's possibly the MGM 140, which is fired by HIMARS and has a longer range? And then also, what would Russia's response be if the U.S. did indeed provide them?
Well, the easiest part of that question to answer, I think, is it's the ATACMS, and I don't know if that's the MGM 240 that you just used, but it's the 300-kilometer range missile. On the HIMARS, you can fire the HIMARS either in the 12 missile pod, or you can remove that pod and you can put in the single missile ATACMS. Only on the tracked variant. I don't think the wheeled variant can fire the ATACMS. The ATACMS is a 300-kilometer range missile, battlefield support missile. Great lethality, great accuracy, and it would give the Ukrainians the ability to take out, for instance, if the Ukraine had the ATACMS, the Kherson Bridge is history.
Even with the S-400s? Even with the
S-400. One of them will eventually get through and say goodbye to that bridge. Mm-hmm. So, and Russia, that's an existential issue for Russia. They're not going to respond well there. It also threatens the strategic depth of Russia. And so if that happens, Russia basically can't allow it to happen. Now, I don't think that means that Russia is going to be firing off this, Sarmat missile towards Washington, D.C. But I do believe it means that Ramstein Air Base becomes fair game. I believe it means a lot of U.S. Infrastructure and NATO infrastructure, anything in Europe that touches the ATACMS, from the aircraft that brings it in, to the airfield that receives it, to the warehouses that store it, to the trucks and things that bring it in, all that becomes fair game. And Russia will attack. And this is not unprecedented. Look, the United States just threatened China with the same thing. They said, if you attack Taiwan, your entire logistics infrastructure on the Chinese mainland becomes fair game. We're going to attack that. And Russia's just, basically holding up the same standard. If you cross this red line and you provide a weapon systems that we won't, and remember, Biden promised Putin that we would never deploy long range. When I say long range, I don't mean ICBM, but beyond the HIMARS capability, longer range ballistic missiles. We would never deploy them into Ukraine ever. That was a promise that was given, because that's a problem for Russia, and they're not going to let it happen. So I think that's what it means. Again, I can't speak on behalf of the Russian government. I don't know. That seems to be the kind of measured response. You don't respond by nuking Washington.
Oh, yeah.
You respond by taking out the infrastructure in Europe that supports the vision of the ATACMS to the Ukrainians. That means that I believe one of the first targets taken out will be Ramstein Air Base.
And what way does that not lead to nuclear conflict?
I don't know.
Ramstein is one of the largest military bases in the world, correct?
It's a very large base, but the Russians, they photograph, they know what's going on, they know where the weapons land, they know where it's received. You take out the airfield, you take out the aircraft, you take out the support, you make it impossible for an airplane to land at Ramstein.
Do you believe?
Take out the where? Pardon?
I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you believe that the Russian strike would be able to get past NATO defenses, air defenses, missile defenses?
Kinzhal, baby.
Oh yeah.
It's past anything.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't
see.
No,
and this is why the United States has come out and just flat out said no.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this reason I think yesterday just flat out said, nope, we ain't giving you the ATACMS, because we know what'll happen. It's not a secret. I mean, I'm not the only person in the world that sits there and says, where would Russia hit? Probably Ramstein Air Base. I think if I were still on active duty, that's what I'd be telling my bosses. Boss, they're going to take out Ramstein. And then you have to go to your political leadership and say, the potential consequence of deploying ATACMS to Ukraine is Ramstein gets taken out. What is our response? Well, we have to respond. So we're going to hit the units that hit Ramstein, because that's the logical thing. You find the unit that fired the missile and you take them out, cause and effect. But that unit is in Russia. So now we're going to attack Russia. In order to get to that place in Russia, we got to take out all the supporting air defense, because that's what the Russians did to us too. They didn't just take out Ramstein. All the Patriot missile batteries disappeared overnight. Boom, gone. And then we do that. The Russians come back and hit us. Boom, 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 boom. Next thing you know, it's general war, nuclear exchange. Goodbye. The world ends.
Yeah.
They know this, and that's why the answer they just gave was no, we're not going to give Ukraine the attack. So I think this is one of those problems that everybody should be aware of, everybody should be educated on, but I wouldn't lose any sleep over it.
I wanted to move to the United Russia Party, which is, of course, the party that President Putin is a part of and the head of. They've proposed holding referendums in the newly captured, conquered, whatever word you want to use, regions of Ukraine. Do you think that makes sense now, or would that make more sense after the war?
Again, what makes sense to a Russian is far different than what makes sense to an American. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that I'm not insulting anybody. Russia is Russia. It's got its own way of viewing things. When we speak of the American nation, we speak of our borders. We speak of the people in here. It's a melting pot, the American, but we tend to define the American nation as that defined by our borders. The contiguous 50 states, Alaska, Hawaii, or 49 states. Wow, marine math, I tell you, it's amazing. But the Russian nation is different. It's beyond the Russian Federation. The Russian nation is a cultural, historical, religious linkage that exists between Russians and non-Russians alike as part of this Russian nation. So in America, we don't comprehend that. We don't understand that. It's an algorithm that's not clicking in our brains. So that's why it's hard to say, is it right, et cetera. Here's the thing about the Russian nation. Vladimir Putin in 2005 gave a speech to the Federal Assembly. I think it was the State of the Nation speech, April 2005. And that's the one where he famously said one of the greatest geopolitical catastrophes of the last century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. But then he followed up by saying, because overnight tens of millions of Russian people were made homeless. And then he spoke about the Russian nation. And we're talking about all of the things that he's talking about, the cultural, the history, et cetera, that makes the Russian nation, that goes beyond. He said, my job isn't just to defend the Federation, the Russian people, it's to defend the Russian nation, which is inclusive of Ukraine, Belarus, et cetera. And that's a big deal. And then there's also the issue of is that your cat?
That's my dog. She wants attention. Oh, your dog? Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. I thought Maverick was the only dog that disrupted things. Yay, puppies. But no, the thing is, so the Russian nation is a big deal. When Putin spoke on February 21st and on February 24th in his lead-up addresses to the special military operation, he invoked the imagery of the Russian nation. He spoke how important it was that this special military operation was about defending the Russian nation. Here's a couple things. One, Kharkov was part of the Russian nation, Kharkov Oblast. The people that were under Russian control were the Russian nation. Russia just abandoned the crap out of these people. The Russian military in its rapid withdrawal, yes, they got a lot of people out. They abandoned a lot of people, and they're paying a heavy price right now. A sickening fact, there's a guy named Gary Tabak. He's a U.S. Navy captain. Bit of disclosure, he doesn't like me. That's okay. A lot of people don't like me. I'm not worried about it. But in case anybody Googles him, they'll find out, he doesn't like Scott. Maybe Scott's trying to pick on him. I'm not. Not for that. But this is a guy, if you take a look at his website, he has an American flag, like yours, in the background. But over it, he's draped the right sector flag. Put the right sector flag over the American flag. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who was present in Odessa in May of 2014 with right sector. Now, I'm not accusing him of any crimes, but right sector put 150 Russians into a building, set on fire, and burned to death 84 of them. So my dog's turn to disrupt. That tells you where his mind is. He just gave an interview where he talked about bragging about how the Ukrainians were now hunting down the collaborators and killing them. Mm-hmm. Hunting them down and killing. This is a Navy captain, a retired Navy captain, U.S. military officer, who's bragging about Ukrainian government revenge on collaborators with Russia. Anybody who voluntarily worked with the Russians while the Russians were in control are collaborators. Apparently, the penalty is death. And we've seen imagery coming out of Kharkov now of freshly killed bodies. So, here the Russian president and the Russian leadership talks about protecting the Russian nation. They just abandoned the Russian nation in Kharkov, abandoned it. And now you want to talk about a referendum in Kherson? Well, the Russian nation in Kherson, how much confidence do they have right now that this is going to be permanent? Because if you do John Hancock, famously signed the Declaration of Independence with his big signature, because in doing so, he condemned himself to death. That if they lost this gambit for independence, every signature on that page was somebody that was going to be taken and hung by the neck until dead for betraying the crown. Anybody who votes in this referendum participates in it is viewed as a traitor by the Ukrainian government. What has Russia done to convince the Russian nation of Ukraine that they're there forever, that they're going to win, that they're going to prevail? What is the vision? Russia has a hell of a lot of talking to do to the Russian nation. What's going on in Odessa? Do you want it or don't you want it? Kharkov, are you coming back or are not you coming back? Dnipropetrovsk, what's going to happen there? What is the Russian nation? Putin talked about the Russian nation, the need to protect the nation, and yet this special military operation has taken a Ukrainian government that already had issues with its ethnic Russian population. And now they've gone hard right anti-Russian. Listen to the laws coming out of Ukraine. Banning Russian language, banning Russian culture, banning Russian history, banning anything Russian, everything Russian, burning books, banning movies. Now, close your eyes, eliminate the word Russia, insert the word Jew. And Ukraine has become Nazi Germany, literally. And they're running pogroms right now. They're killing Russians. Russians are viewed as animals. The orcs. Okay? This isn't a game. This isn't exaggeration. This is real. We created the United States by funding it. Russia created by provoking it. But what the world has created in Ukraine is a modern day version of the same hate-filled, ultranationalistic, racially biased, Nazi-type ideology that we thought we eradicated with Adolf Hitler. But it's alive and well and living in Ukraine today. And by empowering these people, by mainstreaming this anti-Russian, not just rhetoric, but policies and actions, this is a direct threat to the Russian nation that has to be dealt with. It's a boil that must be lanced if you say we believe in the Russian nation, if you define it the way Vladimir Putin did. So I would tell the Russia First Party, before you talk about a referendum, talk about what your vision is for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Educate us first. How are you going to protect the Russian nation? Are you going to protect the people that vote in the referendum? How about if I'm somebody in Crimea right now? Is Russia here for good? Or are they just faking it? I mean, I need to know. So there's a lot of explaining that needs to be done. If I were the Russians, and I'm not, but I would hold off on the referendum until I've properly defined what my post-conflict reality is going to look like. What is my strategic vision for helping the Russian nation? How are Russians of the Russian nation who reside in Ukraine going to be protected? What guarantees are they going to be given? Because here's the weakness part. Here's the risk. If Russia yields on the issue of Ukraine and allows the Russian nation in Ukraine to be subjugated, tortured, murdered, raped, whatever, by Ukrainians, over in the Baltics, we have 3 republics that are as equally Nazi-oriented as the Ukrainians. You scratch an Estonian, you scratch a Latvian, you scratch a Lithuanian, you have a Nazi. They worship these guys. They fought for them. They slaughtered Jews on behalf of them. They were never denazified. They're there. They're alive. They're willing. And they're taking the lead off of Ukraine. And if Ukraine suddenly emerges as this Nazi regime where slaughtering everything Russia is A-OK and Russia's not going to do a damn thing about it, trust me, the Russian nation and the Baltics aren't safe either. So I think this is one of these, this is where it becomes existential in nature. Putin has defined this conflict using the imagery of the Russian nation. And I think he needs to tighten that down. I think he needs to explain to the Russian nation, to the Russian people, and indeed to the world, what he means by that. And I think that would have to come first before a referendum, because otherwise you're putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, the Nazism you're talking about is becoming so widespread. It's incredibly dangerous. You even see it online. You have a lot of people, prominent people who like to call themselves anti-racist and they're anti-discriminatory and all that, but then they're willing to call Russians orcs and they're willing to get behind killing all Russians and things like that. It's completely absurd and hypocritical and extremely dangerous. Like you're saying, it's like the lead up to World War II, what we saw in Germany in the 30s. Yeah.
Well, it's also unleashing. Again, we touched on this, but the danger of the special military operation in Ukraine right now is that it is unleashing the forces of extreme nationalism. Look, the Russian leadership has to be very careful, because nationalism isn't good. Extreme nationalism, unconstrained nationalism is not good in any way, shape, or form. And this conflict is starting to be defined in Russia as a nationalist conflict. And that creates a whole bunch of psychological factors that affect how the Russian people will interact with the rest of the world. There's already a lot of talk right now, and you see it on social media, where Russians are just basically, they hate the West. They don't trust the West. And I understand why. I'm not pretending that there's not justification. But I have to tell you that if you ever want a diplomatic off-ramp from this conflict towards bettering relations, this ultra-nationalism is going to make that much more difficult, because it creates a political reality that Russian leadership has to deal with when putting forward policies on how to improve relations with the West. The Russian people will have to want to improve relations with the West in order for there to be better relations with the West. And right now, this nationalism is out of control. The nationalism in Poland is empowering them to think that they can demand reparations from Germany. Nationalism in Germany, I mean, when Schultz says, I want to build the most powerful military Germany has ever had, he might as well go, I want to build the most powerful military Germany ever had. I mean, because that's what he's becoming, Adolf Hitler. No, Germany doesn't deserve a powerful military. I'm sorry. You guys had that once. No more.
Twice.
You get to be a powerful economy, but you don't get to be a powerful military. And if I were the president of the United States, I'd call him up and say, if you want a big problem with America, continue on this path, because we're not going to let you become, the Fourth Reich. That's not going to happen, Schultz. You don't get to be a military power in Europe. I'm sorry. You didn't earn that right. You lost the war, and you've still lost the war. We're not going to let you suddenly win the war. And that's harsh, but it's true. Germany is a potential cancer in the middle of Europe. And giving Germany a large military and then creating the conditions where that military can orient to the east to go through Poland. And we did this once before. We don't need to do it again. And if they're starting to talk about redrawing the map in Poland, saying Silesia is once against Germany, then what happens when you orient to the west and you start looking at Strasbourg and you start looking at areas in France that the Germans like to believe belong to them? What happens when the Germans start to look towards Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland? Ah, yes, and you get this nice German accent. Then you grow the mustache, and next thing you know, you're wearing black uniforms with swastikas on them. So no, it doesn't. The United States, again, has to take a leadership role. The reason why all of this is happening is because we've allowed chaos to engender itself into Europe. We need to step in and shut this thing down, or else it's just going to spin out of control, really.
Yeah, I mean, we know this winter is going to be catastrophic, especially if it's freezing. We're going to, what happens if these EU countries fall apart, if they fall out of the EU? And now we have, like you're saying, we have Germany who's making a bigger military, and what if Germany wants that Sudetenland? What if Germany wants parts of France? I mean, we could easily see Europe spiral into a continent-wide conflict.
Once the glue comes off, you don't know how the structure is going to collapse. The glue is coming off. Mm-hmm. This is the question. Again, I'm all these foreign policy people and these generals. We need to start conceptualizing what this looks like after Russia loses. Russia ain't going to lose.
Yeah.
I really think all this brain power should be looking at what happens when the European Union collapses, what happens when NATO falls into fratricidal conflict, what happens. These are the questions they need to start asking when the sanctions, when the results of the sanctions fully hit, and you have economies shutting down, you have people freezing, you have riots in the street. What's Europe going to look like after this? And if you can't answer that question, and this is always the important thing, if you're allowing something to happen and you can't tell me what the end game's going to be, what it's going to look like, then maybe we shouldn't allow it to happen. Maybe we should step in and keep it to what we know, what we understand, what we can deal with, which is the present. Europe can still be preserved right now. Ukraine should not be allowed to dictate the future of Europe. Should not. Ukraine, again, I gotta be careful what I say, but because it's very sensitive, but it's in many ways, it's an artificial construct, an accident of history. And I'm not saying that Ukraine doesn't deserve to exist. I'm saying that Ukraine in its current configuration doesn't deserve to exist. No neo-Nazi affiliated regime deserves to exist. And when you have targeted 1/3 of your population as subhuman, calling them orcs, you don't deserve to exist. When you have another third of your population embracing the ideology of Stepan Bandera, elevating him to the status of national hero, no. So Ukraine is a broken nation, fundamentally broken nation. Why Europe is committing suicide to preserve a broken nation is beyond me. I'm not saying 100% that Vladimir Putin's historical understanding of Ukraine is right. I'm sure there could be pushback on many areas, but he's closer to the truth than Europe is. And maybe we need to let Russia and Ukraine sort this thing out. But no, we're stepping in the middle of it, and we're allowing Ukraine to become an issue that will destroy Europe. And that's just wrong.
Just wrong. It seems pretty clear that's going to happen. When Europe falls, collapses, whatever you want to say, and NATO probably, what is the U.S. going to do? We have so much hardware over there at Ramstein and various other bases, even nuclear missiles, I believe. What are we going to do with all that?
Well, we don't have nuclear. We have B-61 bombs,
okay,
air deliverable bombs. Well, this is again the $1 million question that people, Rand Corporation should be working on this problem with the same enthusiasm that they published their 2019 study on how to dismember, to create disarray in Russia. Everybody should be asking this question. The United States does not have sufficient military infrastructure in Europe to hold Europe together by force. We might have been able to do that back in the 1970s and 1980s. We can't do it today. And when a nation decides they no longer want America there, then America's not going to be there. Germany says, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. It's auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. We have to go. We can't say, no, we refuse to leave. We're going to stay in Ramstein. Well, that's going to be suicidal for whoever's there. So, the United States doesn't have the ability to immediately impose its will. What are we going to do? Go through general mobilization here in the United States to build a military that we can then transport across the Atlantic to what? Invade Europe and hold Europe? No, that's not going to happen. We have in place today structures, European Union and NATO, which are very oriented towards America and serving America's interests. It's in our interest to preserve these structures. Now, some of our policies have created conditions which weaken these structures. So we need to re-examine these policies. Number one policy of which needs to be re-examined is the long-held belief that if Russian energy is in Europe, this creates a national security crisis for Europe. That was always a hypothetical that was unproven. Let me give you a proven hypothesis. If Russian energy is denied to Europe, Europe ceases to exist. That is a provable point. We're proving it as we speak. So I would advise the United States to find a way to keep Europe from falling apart by encouraging Russian energy to come in. That would be in the best interest. Yeah, you solve almost every problem instantly overnight. If you're happy with the current political elite that's in Europe, then turn on Nord Stream 2 get Siemens pumps delivered to Nord Stream 1 and make the energy crisis go away. Stop sanctioning Russian energy. That is the solution. It's the most obvious solution out there. To end this crisis, because one thing you'll do, I mean, this is the irony of ironies. Let's say because everybody's like, well, damn, Russia just made an extra $30 billion last quarter. They're making more money now than they were before. The sanctions have backfired. Okay, you're right, because it's stupid. You don't understand Russian energy. You don't understand global energy security. You want to know how you get Russia to stop making money? You really want to complicate Russia's life right now? Because Russia's in the middle of this economic transformation, going from west to east. You want to play with their minds? You want to play with the economy? Turn on Nord Stream 2. Watch gas prices plummet. And suddenly Russia's not making as much money as they used to be, because Russia's a prisoner to the, to the global economy. And then you really want to screw with Russia? Buy everything in rubles.
Why would that affect them negatively?
First of all, you're going to start. Russia's going to have to start printing rubles, because there ain't enough rubles right now. So Russia, in order to meet the global demand, they're going to have to come up with something they're not designed to come up with. Russia linked the ruble to the gold standard, which means there's a finite amount of gold. How do you dilute that? You turn to the Russians and say, I'm going to grant your wish, brother. Buy all your energy. We're paying it in rubles. We're doing it. But you don't have enough rubles? You don't have enough rubles? Huh. See, we can devalue the ruble. We can, geez, I said a word I'm not allowed to say. We can mess with the ruble. Russia's not invulnerable. We've allowed Russia to create this fortress Russia that's very difficult to attack, not because Russia's done anything, because we've made it impossible to attack. Lift the sanctions, get energy flowing, get the ruble in a state of flux, and then start screwing with the Russian economy by engaging with the Russian economy. When you create, you've simplified Russia's economic reality by creating this wall, because Russia no longer has to worry about the complexities of the Western economy. They're now focused on integrating with the Eastern economy. Insert Western competition into that framework to dilute some of the impact that the East connectivity is going to make, and you're complicating the situation for the Russians. I'm not saying Russia's not going to be able to get out of it. I'm just saying that you're complicating it. It's a control mechanism if you want to slow down this transition away from an American hegemony towards a multipolarity. And I'm saying this wearing my American hat. Now, I'm not saying that I believe in this. I'm just saying, what could America do? The quickest solution to all the problems that confront us is literally to turn back on all the energy connectivity with the West. It's first of all, you'll stabilize Europe overnight. Overnight, you stabilize Europe. The European economy will become very strong. And then things happen that Russia has to worry about. Germany can now afford that big army, and things of that nature. So, but we're not going to do that. And so all we're doing is guaranteeing that Russia's going to come out of this a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, baby. Russia, and they don't even have to work at it. Maybe this is our 5D chess, because Russia spent so many decades building up this very efficient bureaucracy because they had to deal with a very complex world where they were in a confrontational stance with the United States. So maybe our 5D chess is we're going to simplify Russia so we dumb them down, so they become like us, stupid, lethargic, complacent. And then we spring the trap on them and say, no, it's really a complicated world. You're not really. I'm joking here. I'm being facetious. My point is, I don't know what our strategy is. I don't know what our strategy is. We don't have a strategy. So that's that. I think we gotta come close to wrapping this up, because I've got another commitment. But I'll continue to ask. You can ask like a couple more questions, but then we got to go.
One theory I've had for about a week or so now is that Russia may want to extend this conflict in Ukraine a bit longer than you'd think they'd want to, because gas prices are so high right now. They're making so much money selling gas, selling oil. Do you agree with that? Do you think that maybe?
Yeah, no, I think, look, I think Russia wanted to win this war quickly.
Yeah.
Special military operation. I think the phase one operation was designed basically to put some sort of shock and awe on Ukraine and get it to collapse. That didn't happen. I then think Russia believed that phase two would go better than it did, but they've run into the reality of $53 billion worth of aid. That's a big mountain you got to climb now. So now Russia realizes they're not going to get this thing done by the fall. And, and Russia's been very mature about not putting artificial calendar-driven timelines on here. We have to, I remember the Mariupol, all the armchair experts. Russia needs to take Mariupol by Victory Day because Putin will be embarrassed if he can't get up there and say, we have won Mariupol. Putin didn't care. Putin had his parade. He did what he wanted. The military is going to take Mariupol when Mariupol falls to the military campaign. No artificial timelines. But that means that now Russia, by fighting this war in a way that preserves Russian life, they're looking at the reality that this is going to extend into the winter. And this is where Russia accrues a lot of advantages. I don't think that Russia intended for this thing to last winter, but it now looks at it's going to. So I think we're going to see more or less an operational pause. I mean, they'll be fighting, don't get me wrong, but no, I don't think we're going to see decisive fighting in Ukraine. Watch Russia launch a major offensive in November and win the war, and everybody say, Ritter, you were wrong again. Okay, so what? But I don't think we're going to see Russia launching a major offensive this winter because Russia is going to accrue so many benefits from the bad policies of Europe. Russia, one of their strategic objectives is to negotiate a new European security framework with Europe that deals with the retrograde of NATO infrastructure back to 1997 lines, et cetera. Russia tried to promote this in December of last year, ignored by the United States and NATO. And I think Russia realizes that if the United States and NATO emerge intact or somehow emboldened by Ukraine, that the likelihood of them changing their minds and suddenly having a new think about this is zero. But if Europe is collapsing, NATO is fracturing, et cetera, the United States and European gap is greater, Russia can emerge from the winter with a military victory in the spring and the summer, in a position where the next time it approaches Europe about a new European security framework, Europe might be in a better position to say, we would do that if it leads to some widespread stability, because Europe's going to be desperate for stability, and a new European security framework that's sold as a vehicle of stabilization might be more readily received. So I think Russia is looking at the coming winter as a force multiplier, and it also helps them economically on the global stage. This transition that Putin and Xi talked about on February 4th, they signed their 5,000-word joint statement about, the end of the rules-based international order and the emergence of a law-based international order, one that is founded on the principles of the United Nations Charter, one that is not based upon a unipolarity reality of American hegemony, but rather a multipolarity reality of multiple nations, including America, that work together to achieve, some sort of global stability. They're transitioning towards that. It's becoming a reality, and this winter is going to help accelerate some of things, because the collapse of Europe means the collapse of the G7, the collapse of the World Bank, the collapse of the International Monetary Fund. All these institutions that underpin the rules-based international order are likewise going to collapse. And that's Russia's strategic objective. So I think this winter is going to be very, very decisive. The level of the Russian victory will be determined by the temperature. The colder it is, the greater the Russian victory. The warmer it is, the less the Russian victory will be. But either way, Russia, no matter what, is going to emerge from this in a very, very strong position.
Yeah. I have one more question if you have the time, and I just have one statement before that question. Vladimir Putin was speaking the other day, and he talked about the demonstrators in Germany demanding that Nord Stream 2 be certified and activated. And Putin essentially, he didn't say it, but he implied that if if Germany were to take the sanctions away and they were to, essentially not necessarily apologize, but to apologize to Russia, then Russia would let the gas flow through Nord Stream 2. So, it's up to Germany, is my point. It's up to Europe. They have to stop following in the United States' footsteps. They have to be independent. They have to be Europe for Europeans if they want to have a future. My last question is, you mentioned the new European security framework. What do you think that would look like, just like generally speaking? Obviously, that's a massive question we don't have time for, but just in general.
Yeah. Let me start on your statement just to make a comment. America's been the worst parent in the world. I mean, we gave birth to Europe after World War II. We birthed it. We've been raising it. And this is like me being a parent, looking at my 30-year-old child saying, why aren't you out of the damn basement out getting a job? But I never let them leave the basement. Mm-hmm. I never let them get a job. And suddenly I want to tell them to grow up. It doesn't work that way. Effective parenting is from very early stage, transferring responsibility from the parent to the child as the child transitions into adulthood so that the child become a functioning member of society. The United States has never allowed Europe, Germany, anybody else to be a functioning member of society. They've always been subservient. So it's very difficult to talk about Europe suddenly growing up. But, in emergencies, people mature quickly, and so do nations. And I think there's going to be a lot of emergencies this winter, and let's see how Europe responds. Are they just going to cower in the corner of mommy's basement and cry, or are they going to actually man up, woman up, step up, and assert themselves? European security framework. Again, this is just purely me speaking on what I think. I go back to the last time the Soviet Union and NATO and the United States looked at this. What were some of the important elements? One was it's a treaty-based relationship, which means binding law, which means elements of mutually binding compliance verification. That it's trust but verify. So that has to be an important part of it. So that means that we have to start codifying relationships back in terms of treaty. Back in the Cold War, we started off with we had the INF Treaty. From the INF Treaty came START. From START came CFE, became Open Skies. Basically, it's this framework of security that defined things. It was reciprocal in nature, codified. Everybody knew what to expect. That model is going to have to be brought in. I do believe that if Russia emerges from Ukraine victorious, as I believe they will, and NATO weakened, here's the danger. Russia's strength will be perceived as a threat by Europe, and then Europe is going to be spending as much time as possible countering that strength, and we've replicated the Cold War buildup of conventional military power in Europe. Very dangerous situation. So it's in Russia's best interest. And this is another reason why general mobilization is not attractive. These contract volunteers that they're going to build up to come in to solve the SMO problem. The beauty of that is the contracts can be limited to the SMO, meaning that when the special military operation is over, they can be rapidly demobilized, returned to civil society, and Russia's left with the military that it has today, which is less threatening than a bigger, expanded military. But Russia is going to have to, I believe, work with Europe to, what you want to do is find a way to get Russia's power to be drawn down and keep Europe's power from going too far up. So you're going to have to find this balance. And you do that with a new conventional forces in Europe treaty. You do that with a treaty that creates, it's not going to be a zone of neutrality. It will be a zone of diminished military capacity. And then, Russia will, keep sufficient forces on this zone to guarantee border security and things of that nature. But the major forces might have to draw deeper into the Russian interior. The same thing, NATO infrastructure will have to be drawn back to 1997 lines. But now you're going to de-emphasize the military buildup, et cetera. Nuclear weapons have to be removed from the situation altogether. So you need to reinstate the INF Treaty, and it has to be binding for all parties. And the United States is going to have to, when we talk about nuclear disarmament, the United States is going to have to be willing to do two things. One, insist that French and British nuclear forces be a part of this. So far, they've been able to set off separately. No, you're in on this. It was difficult to do in the old days, but with this new reality that's going to emerge, I think that might be the case. And the U.S. is going to have to get rid of its B-61 bombs. They're going to move from it. This whole nuclear posture where we provide bombs on nuclear nations so that if Germany has an F-35 fighter, they used to be the core NATO, that they got to deliver nuclear weapons as a NATO nuclear deterrent, but it's really an American nuclear bomb on a German plane. That's over. That way, if Finland wants to buy F-35A fighters, Russia doesn't have to worry about those fighters because they're already adapted to carry nuclear bombs, suddenly having nuclear bombs on them to deliver nuclear missions. You take the nuclear bombs the hell out of the equation, the F-35 just becomes a very expensive piece of junk. And that, so I think that's that. A ballistic missile defense. I think we have to reinstitute the ABM treaty, at least in a European context. These ballistic missile defense systems that are currently installed in Romania and in Poland have to go away. That would be part of the reduction of NATO infrastructure. And that has to be for both parties. Russia has developed some very effective anti-ballistic missile capabilities, and Russia's going to have to put those on the table as well. That's just a statement of fact. So Russia's going to have to, there's going to have to be some, give and take, but Russia's going to have to be able to put some stuff on the table as well. But I think by reinstituting an INF treaty, an ABM treaty, and a CFE treaty in a new context. It can be one singular treaty. It can be three separate components, whatever. But if you do all of that, you now have a European security framework that de-emphasizes military conflict, makes it virtually impossible for there to be a general war between, and now Europe and Russia can begin the process, a very lengthy process of rebuilding relationships. But the key aspect of rebuilding relationships is trust, and trust can only exist in an environment where there's reciprocal obligations that can be verified through effective compliance monitoring regimes, all treaty-based.
So would NATO wouldn't be involved in this anymore? Would NATO be disbanded?
No, NATO. I think from Russia's perspective, to be honest, you want NATO involved.
Mm-hmm.
Because NATO is a linchpin of European security and stability. What you want to do, though, is refocus NATO's mission statement from being one of a singular focus on building up to oppose a Russian threat. NATO's new statement is working cooperatively with Russia to reduce the threat. But you need NATO. You need that connectivity. You need the singularity of mind that it brings to it. And Russia's never said we want NATO to be dismantled. Russia just simply said we don't want NATO on our border.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, again, thank you very much. I always appreciate talking with you. I know it goes long and people probably rolling their eyes, but you're very well prepared. You ask great questions, and it's a very relaxed environment. With your dog and my dog in the background, I think we've established puppy domination. So but thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you coming on.
Okay. Well, have a great day.
You too.
And send me a link when you can. I'll put it up for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day.